My name is Clara. I'm 36, and I've just come from laying my husband, Leo, to rest on the other side of the world. After a 30-hour odyssey of recycled air and sleepless grief, I sent a message to my family's group chat. Landed, 5 p.m. Any chance for a pickup? My brother Marcus was the first to respond. Swamped. Get a lift. My mother's follow-up was even colder. You should have arranged this sooner, Clara. With fingers that felt like foreign objects, I typed back, no problem, as my composure finally shattered. I had no way of knowing that within just a few hours, my family would be watching my private agony unfold on their local evening news broadcast. Before I explain how my tragedy became a public spectacle, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever felt utterly alone when you needed someone the most, consider liking and subscribing. Before sorrow became the defining feature of my world, my life was something most would consider idyllic. Leo and I found each other at a campus art show during our junior year of college. He'd made a clumsy joke about a sculpture I was admiring, and instead of being offended, I found his awkwardness charming. That one conversation bloomed into a coffee date, and we were inseparable after that. We got married a year after graduation and methodically built a beautiful life for ourselves in Seattle. I was a graphic designer with a growing freelance business, while Leo was a brilliant architect whose projects were starting to gain recognition. Our craftsman-style home had a small back patio where Leo had built me a potter's corner, my sanctuary. He used to tease me that my lopsided, lovingly made mugs could be considered modern art if I just gave them pretentious names. 12 years of marriage had felt like a single, blissful season. We explored new countries whenever we could, hosted fiercely competitive board game nights with our friends, and were meticulously saving for our future. We'd recently started talking seriously about having children, even clearing out the spare room that served as my studio, imagining it as a nursery. The entire trajectory of our lives was altered last autumn when Leo was offered an 8-month contract to oversee a major architectural project in Dubai. It was a career-defining opportunity, a chance for him to make his mark on an international scale, and for us to experience life as expats. I made plans to work remotely and join him for a couple of months at a time. The adventure felt limitless. The evening before he left, we cooked his favorite pasta at home. The memory is seared into my mind. The low hum of a jazz station, the warm glow of candlelight on our faces, and the sincere way Leo looked at me as he promised this would set us up for an even more incredible future. 8 months will be over before you know it, he promised, his hand covering mine on the table. And then, our next chapter begins. For the first few months, our daily video calls bridged the distance. I flew out to spend a month with him over the Christmas holidays, and it was a magical, sun-drenched second honeymoon. Dubai was a city of stunning contrasts, and Leo was an enthusiastic guide. He introduced me to his colleagues, and we spent our weekends exploring the desert dunes and historic souks. Everything felt more than perfect. It felt destined. We even picked out baby names one evening, laughing under a sky full of stars. Then came the call that fractured my reality. I was back in Seattle when Leo mentioned a splitting headache during our morning chat. Just project stress, he'd said, rubbing his temples. The deadline is a monster. Less than 10 hours later, one of his colleagues called me from Leo's phone. My husband had collapsed in a planning meeting. He'd been rushed to the hospital. I was on the next flight out, a frantic 22-hour blur of terror and prayer. By the time I arrived, Leo was in a deep coma. A brain aneurysm, the doctors said in gentle, clinical terms. They had performed emergency surgery, but the resulting brain damage was irreversible. For 6 agonizing days, I lived in that sterile hospital room, holding his unresponsive hand, whispering our memories to him, pleading for a miracle that was never going to come. Leo never woke up. He was only 38. The nightmare of navigating a foreign medical system was followed by the agony of arranging a funeral thousands of miles from home. The service was small, attended by a few of his kind colleagues, some other expats he'd befriended, and me. I was the sole representative of his entire life back home. My parents claimed the last-minute airfare was prohibitively expensive. My brother had a critical presentation at his firm. So I stood there, utterly alone, as they lowered the love of my life into the ground in a country that was not his own. The financial devastation was immediate. Our travel insurance had a cap on medical emergencies abroad, a detail I'd never thought to scrutinize. I liquidated our joint savings and ran up every credit card we had to cover the hospital bills and funeral costs. Through it all, I sent updates to my family, clinging to a sliver of hope that someone would offer more than platitudes and logistical advice. In retrospect, their response to my airport text should not have been a surprise. My family had always functioned this way. When I was 10, I fell and broke my ankle badly at the playground. My parents took me to the ER but left me with a neighbor for the rest of the day so they could take Marcus to his regional debate tournament. He's been working towards this all year, my mother had explained, as if that settled it. When I won a significant scholarship to a prestigious art school, my father's first reaction was to ask if it would still cost them anything. Marcus was attending an expensive private university, fully funded by them, he reminded me. Art school had been my dream, so it was my responsibility. I worked 3 part-time jobs through college. On my wedding day, my mother had loudly critiqued my choice of a simple, elegant dress as not festive enough, and my father spent the reception complaining about the catering bill for our modest affair. Marcus was nearly an hour late for the ceremony itself. Leo had noticed it all, but he'd always gently steered me away from the hurt. "We can't change who they are, Clara," he would say, "but we can control how much of our happiness we let them hold." During the funeral arrangements in Dubai, I had called home nearly every day. The calls usually went straight to voicemail. When I did manage to get someone on the phone, the conversation was always brief, centered on my return date rather than my state of mind. My mother suggested I was wallowing by staying for a proper funeral instead of having Leo cremated immediately. Before even asking how I was, Marcus had asked if Leo had a good life insurance policy. Yet despite this consistent, lifelong pattern of neglect, a foolish part of my heart believed that this, the absolute worst, most shattering event of my existence, would finally break through their self-absorption. I thought surely this time they would see my pain and offer the comfort I so desperately needed. 3 days before my flight home, I sent my full itinerary to the family group chat. The response was a collection of thumbs-up emojis and a message from Marcus asking if I could bring him back some dates from Dubai. I confirmed my arrival time twice more before I boarded, a pathetic, silent plea for someone to offer to be there. No one did. But I tried one last time when the plane's wheels touched down on American soil. My brother's reply, swamped. "Get a lift," felt like a physical slap. My mother's, "You should have arranged this sooner," made me wonder if my very existence was just an inconvenience to them. In that moment, buckled into a cramped airline seat while other passengers eagerly retrieved their bags, I made a quiet vow to Leo and to myself. This was the last time I would ever try to draw water from a dry well. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was a chaotic blur of motion and noise as I navigated my way through immigration. The harsh fluorescent lights felt like an assault after days of sleeplessness, and the cheerful overhead announcements made me want to scream. I moved through the terminal like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my soul was still 6,000 miles away. At the baggage carousel, I watched luggage circle endlessly. Mine were easy to spot. A large gray suitcase with my own clothes, and two smaller ones filled with Leo's things. The pieces of him I couldn't stand to leave behind: his favorite cashmere sweater, the sketchbook I'd given him for our last anniversary, our photo albums, the specific mug he used for his morning tea. These were the tangible fragments of our shared life, and they were all I had left. My phone vibrated with a new notification from the family chat. I opened it, a fool's hope flickering. It was Marcus. "Seriously, Clara, we can't just drop everything last minute. That's what planning is for." Then my mom: "Your father and I have dinner reservations with the Gallaghers. We confirmed weeks ago." And finally my dad: "The weather report looks bad for later. Be safe on the drive home." I just stared at the screen, the familiar hollow ache spreading through my chest. Not a single question about my well-being or whether I'd even landed safely. No acknowledgement of the hell I'd just endured. I typed out a simple, "No problem, I understand," even though I didn't understand at all. How could a dinner reservation possibly take precedence over your daughter returning home after burying her husband? The weight of the 3 suitcases felt immense as I loaded them onto a luggage cart. Leo's belongings were a physical burden that mirrored my emotional one. As I wrestled the cart towards the exit, a wheel jammed and the top suitcase toppled off, bursting open on the polished floor. His clothes spilled out in a heartbreaking display of our private life made public. I fell to my knees, scrambling to gather his things as hot tears obscured my vision. A worn t-shirt from our trip to Italy, his running shoes, the ridiculous Christmas-themed tie he loved. Each item was a new stab of grief. "Here, let me help you with that, dear." An airport staff member was kneeling beside me, her touch gentle as she started collecting the scattered items. Her name tag read Brenda, and her eyes were full of a kindness that seemed ancient and profound. "Are you okay?" The simple, direct question was my undoing. When was the last time someone in my family had asked me that? Not what my plans were or what I was going to do next, but just if I was okay. "My husband," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "I just buried him. In Dubai." Brenda's expression softened into one of pure, unadulterated empathy. She helped me repack the suitcase without another word, then personally walked me to the rideshare pickup zone. "Is anyone coming for you?" she asked softly. I just shook my head, unable to speak. Her frown was eloquent, but she simply waited with me until my lift arrived, helped the driver with my bags, and gave my hand a firm squeeze. "You take care of yourself now," she said. It was more genuine warmth than my own family had offered in weeks. The ride cost $92 because of the evening rush. The driver, a young man named Sam, tried to make small talk, but my one-word answers must have clued him in. He seemed to sense my fragility, turning on some quiet instrumental music and respecting the silence. An hour later, we pulled into my driveway. The house looked the same, but it felt alien. Leo would never walk through that door again. His car would never again be in the driveway. He would never again complain about the neighbor's cats sleeping on our porch. Sam helped me get my luggage onto the porch. As he set the last bag down, he hesitated. "Ma'am, are you sure you're all right? You seem like you could use a friend." I lied and said I was fine, gave him a large tip, and waited until his car disappeared before I fumbled for my keys. The door opened into a wall of frigid, dark air. I'd asked my mother if she could stop by and turn up the heat before I arrived. She must have forgotten. The air was stale, and a mountain of mail had spilled out of the small basket by the door, another chore my family had promised to handle. In the kitchen, the refrigerator held only a jar of expired pickles and a carton of soured milk. Marcus had sworn he'd stock some basics for me. Too exhausted to process any of it, I dragged my body upstairs. I couldn't face our shared bed, so I curled up in the large armchair by our bedroom window, still in my travel clothes, the deep chill of the house seeping into my bones. Surrounded by photos of us laughing, of us living, I finally let go and wept until there was nothing left. I woke up hours later, stiff, disoriented, and shivering. The silence in the house was absolute, a profound emptiness that hadn't existed when Leo was here. No sound of him typing in his office, no clatter of him making a late-night snack, no distant hum of the TV. Leo's closet door was slightly ajar, a silent invitation. My family had promised they would go through his things to spare me the pain on my immediate return. But inside, it was a perfect time capsule. His shirts were hung by color, just as he always kept them. The sweater he'd worn on his last day in Seattle was still draped over a chair. Everything was exactly as it had been 8 months ago, a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. I sank to the floor, wrapping his sweater around me, desperately trying to find a trace of his scent. There was only the sterile smell of fabric and the faint mustiness of a room left undisturbed. I had carried his memory across an ocean, only to come home and find that even the space he inhabited no longer felt like him. Morning brought a strange dripping sound from downstairs. I slowly made my way down the stairs, every joint aching. The sound grew louder as I neared the kitchen. I flipped the light switch, and a gasp escaped my lips. Water was streaming from a massive crack in the ceiling, running down the cabinets and forming a shallow lake across the tile floor. The house temperature had plummeted overnight. I could see my own breath. I waded through 2 inches of frigid water to the utility closet to find the main water shutoff. The metal valve was painfully cold, but I managed to crank it shut, stopping the deluge. The damage was catastrophic. The water had already seeped into the dining room, causing the hardwood floors to swell and buckle. The kitchen drywall was sagging, and water dripped ominously from the overhead light fixture. A pipe in the attic must have frozen and burst. If someone had just kept the heat on, as I had asked, none of this would have happened. I stood in my flooded kitchen, a bizarre sense of detachment washing over me. After everything else, a household disaster felt almost fitting. Of course this would happen. The local news had been forecasting a severe cold snap for days. My phone was full of weather alerts. My family knew. My dad's text about driving safely proved it. Yet none of them had thought to check the thermostat. I called an emergency plumbing service, but the dispatcher was apologetic. The whole city is dealing with burst pipes from this storm. We can't get anyone out there until Wednesday at the earliest. My next call was to my brother. Marcus answered, his voice rushed. "Hey, can't talk long, getting ready for that dinner with the Gallaghers." "The house is flooded, Marcus," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "A pipe burst. There's water all over and the heat is out. The plumber can't come for days." "Wow, that's rough," he said, his tone more irritated than sympathetic. "Did you try Yelp for other plumbers?" "Marcus, I just flew in from my husband's funeral. I've been traveling for over a day. I can't stay here. It's freezing and there's water near the electrical outlets. Can I please just stay with you for a couple of nights?" The pause on the other end of the line stretched into an eternity. Tonight is just really bad timing, Clara. These clients are a huge deal, and Ashley has her book club stuff all over the guest room. Did you try Mom and Dad? I hung up and dialed my parents. My mother's response was immediate and defensive. Oh, honey, you know we'd love to, but my bridge group is meeting here tomorrow. I've been cleaning all day, and your father's sciatica is flaring up. We just can't have an overnight guest right now. Can't you get a hotel? Your insurance should cover that. By now, I hadn't eaten a real meal in what felt like days. Grief, jet lag, and this new crisis had left me lightheaded and weak. The lights in the house flickered as the storm raged outside. I found a box of stale crackers in a pantry cupboard and ate them while standing in the puddle in my kitchen, the icy water seeping through my shoes. My feet were starting to feel numb, but I couldn't summon the energy to find dry socks. In a final, futile attempt to exert some control, I decided to check the circuit breaker in the basement, hoping to at least get power to the upstairs heaters. The basement steps were wet and treacherous. The space below was partially flooded, the water ankle-deep. Using my phone's flashlight, I sloshed towards the breaker box on the far wall. As I reached to open the metal door, my foot slipped on the slick concrete. I pitched forward, my hand instinctively flying out to brace myself against the metal box. A violent jolt of electricity surged up my arm, throwing me backwards. My head cracked against a concrete support pillar, and the world went black. I regained consciousness on the cold, damp floor, shivering uncontrollably. My right arm throbbed with a pins and needles sensation, and I felt something wet trickling down my forehead. My fingers came away sticky with blood. The fall had opened a gash above my eye. I tried to stand, but a wave of vertigo sent the room spinning. I crawled to the stairs, pulling myself up one step at a time, my vision tunneling. By the time I reached the living room, I was on the verge of passing out again. I collapsed onto the sofa, my body refusing to move another inch. The house was getting colder, and I'd lost all feeling in my hands and feet. A rational part of my brain registered the signs of hypothermia, but it felt like it was happening to someone else. Just as I started to drift away, a shrill, insistent beeping cut through the fog. The carbon monoxide detector. The furnace must have been damaged by the flood, or maybe the storm had blocked an exhaust vent. The house was filling with a poison I couldn't see or smell. My phone was on the coffee table, an arm's length away, but it felt like a mile. My limbs were leaden. As darkness closed in, a strange sense of peace settled over me. If this was the end, at least the pain would finally be over. The last thing I heard before the world faded to black was a frantic pounding on my front door and a muffled voice shouting my name. I learned later that it was Mrs. Gable, my elderly neighbor from across the street. She'd seen water trickling from under my front door and down the porch steps. When I didn't answer her calls or knocks, she heard the high-pitched shriek of the alarm inside and dialed 911 without hesitation. Firefighters had to break down my door. They found me unconscious, with dangerously low body temperature and lethal levels of carbon monoxide in the house. One of the paramedics later told a nurse at Seattle General that a few more hours would have been the difference between a rescue and a recovery. At the hospital, they worked to stabilize me, warming blankets, pure oxygen, stitches for my head, and an EKG to monitor my heart after the electrical shock. When a kind nurse named Grace found my passport with the recent Dubai stamps and saw my wedding ring, she gently asked about my situation. In my delirious state, I apparently told her everything: Leo's death, the lonely funeral, the text messages, the cold, flooded house. She noted my lack of a support system in my chart. Neither of us knew that David Reed, a reporter for a local news station, was at the hospital doing a piece on storm-related emergencies. He overheard two paramedics in the cafeteria talking about my case, the tragic string of events that had almost killed a new widow in her own home. the story was too poignant to pass up. He interviewed Mrs. Gable, who told the camera, "I saw her arrive in a lift last night. She looked like a ghost. I wish I'd gone over then. I feel just awful, knowing what she was going through all alone." He even got a quote from one of the first responders who was visibly upset. We saw the texts on her phone when we found her. It was still open to the family chat. A woman who just lost her husband asks for a ride, and they tell her to take a lift. Then she comes home to a house that's a death trap. It's just wrong. That evening, the story aired. Local woman returns from husband's funeral to near-death ordeal. It detailed my 30-hour journey home, the family's refusal of support, and the series of preventable accidents that nearly claimed my life. Someone at the hospital leaked a screenshot of the text exchange, and it went viral on local social media. The hashtag #NoProblemClara started trending as people shared their own stories of feeling let down by family. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. A plumbing company offered to fix everything for free. A disaster restoration service volunteered to handle the water damage. A downtown hotel offered me a complimentary suite for as long as I needed. As the 10 o'clock news re-aired the segment, complete with footage of fire trucks outside my house, my family saw their private texts become a public indictment. According to the night nurse, my brother Marcus was the first to arrive at my hospital room, his face pale. "We just saw the news," he stammered. "They're twisting this to make us look bad." My mother swept in behind him, already in defense mode. "This is a gross mischaracterization," she announced to the nurse, before even looking at me. "We had no idea the house was in that state. Clara knows we would have helped if we'd known it was serious." My father just stood near the door, his face a blank mask. Only after the nurse left did he approach my bed. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked quietly. It was the first honest question any of them had asked me since Leo died. My phone, now charged by the nurse, started buzzing nonstop with calls from aunts, uncles, and family friends who had seen the report. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, apparently called my mom directly, demanding to know why no one had gone to the airport. My father's business partner texted him to offer any help I needed. The pristine image of the loving, supportive family they had so carefully cultivated was shattering in real time. As I drifted in and out of a medicated haze, I could hear them arguing in hushed, urgent tones in the hallway. Marcus was frantic about the potential damage to his professional reputation. My mother was worried about what her bridge club friends would say. My father suggested that moving me into their house upon discharge was the only way to manage the PR crisis. Their conversation was about optics and damage control, not once about my trauma or grief. Even now, they couldn't see past their own reflections. When the hospital social worker, Ms. Albright, came to discuss my discharge, she told me the community support was still pouring in. A local grief counseling center had offered free sessions. A meal prep service had donated a month's worth of food. "You have choices, Clara," she said gently. "You don't have to go with your family if that's not what feels right for you." It was a revelation. For the first time, someone had given me permission to have a choice, to not be bound by blood ties that felt more like chains. As my family waited anxiously to enact their reputation-saving plan, I closed my eyes and thought of Leo. "Your value isn't defined by their inability to see it," he used to tell me. Lying in that hospital bed, having almost died because of their neglect, I finally, truly understood. By the next morning, my mind was clearer. My family had been keeping a constant, performative vigil by my bedside, their demeanor shifting to one of deep concern whenever a hospital staff member entered. It was a flawless, sickening play. Marcus scrolled through his phone, likely deleting negative comments on his social media, while my mother fussed over my water pitcher, filling the air with pronouncements about how the media blows everything out of proportion. Dr. Evans came in for my morning rounds, and my mother instantly placed a gentle hand on my arm. "We're just so thankful she's safe, Doctor. We'll be taking her home with us to recover. We always take care of our own." The doctor nodded, his eyes on my chart. "Mrs. Hayes has endured extreme physical and emotional trauma. Her recovery will need a quiet, stress-free environment, proper care, and regular monitoring." He looked at me, bypassing my mother entirely. "Clara, what support do you feel you have in place?" Before I could form a word, Marcus interjected. "She has us. We're her family. It was all just a big misunderstanding." Dr. Evans remained impassive. "I see. And will someone be with her 24/7 for the first few days? The concussion requires observation." "Of course," my mother said smoothly. "I'll clear my schedule." The nurse, Grace, came in with my medications. She'd been watching my family's charade all morning. As she took my blood pressure, she asked under her breath, "Are you okay with this plan, Clara? Because Ms. Albright has other options ready for you." My mother's back went rigid. "Other options? She's coming home with us, where she belongs." Grace held my gaze, her expression steady. "The choice is yours," she repeated softly. In that instant, a tectonic plate shifted within me. The choice was mine, not what made them look good, not what was convenient, what I actually needed. I took a breath that felt like the first one in my new life. "I'd like to hear about the other options," I said, my voice clearer and firmer than it had been in months. The room went dead silent. Marcus froze mid-scroll. My mother's jaw dropped. "Clara," she finally sputtered, "you can't be serious. After all we've done." "What exactly have you done?" The words were out before I could stop them, and I felt no desire to pull them back. "When Leo was dying, you were busy. When I buried him, it was too expensive. When I begged for a ride from the airport after 30 hours of hell, you told me to get a lift. When I called you from a freezing, flooded house, you had dinner plans." My voice wasn't hysterical. It was a calm, factual recitation. "So please tell me what you have done that earns you the right to manage my recovery, now that the whole city is watching." Marcus shot to his feet. "That's not fair. We didn't know. You didn't ask," I cut him off. "Not once did any of you truly ask how I was. Not once did you offer help without a list of excuses. You didn't need to see me on the news to know I was a grieving widow. You just chose not to look." My mother's face was flush with indignation. "We have always been there for you, Clara. Your expectations are just completely unrealistic." "Expecting a ride home after burying my husband is unrealistic?" I asked, hoping someone would make sure my house didn't freeze in a winter storm was too much to ask. "We have lives, Clara," Marcus insisted. "We can't remember every little thing." "Every little thing," I repeated, letting the words hang in the silence, like whether or not your sister, a new widow, might be in mortal danger. My father spoke for the first time, his voice low. "Clara, we know you're upset. Grief makes people say things. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in my entire life," I said, meeting his gaze. "I finally see this family for what it is, and I've stopped making excuses for it. I've spent 36 years convincing myself that your breadcrumbs of affection were a banquet." Grace's quiet presence in the room was like an anchor. "I don't hate you," I said, looking at each of them. "I don't even blame you anymore. But I will no longer participate in the fiction that you are capable of giving me the support I need. Not right now." "So you'd rather go with strangers?" my mother demanded, her voice rising. "I'm choosing to surround myself with genuine kindness instead of resentful obligation," I replied. "I'm choosing to heal." Just then, Ms. Albright entered with a file. My family fell silent. She calmly outlined the plan: a 2-week stay at a beautiful hotel downtown while my home was being restored, a meal delivery service, and sessions with the Grief Counseling Center. Several of your neighbors have also organized a schedule to help with errands and appointments, she added. The stark contrast between the selfless generosity of strangers and my family's reluctant, image-based offers was glaring. This is insane, Marcus muttered. You're picking strangers over your own flesh and blood. I looked at my brother. I'm choosing compassion over history, I said. I'm choosing to finally value myself enough to accept help that doesn't come with strings attached. My mother grabbed her purse, her movements stiff with fury. Fine. But when you come to your senses, don't expect us to drop everything for you again. That's the point, I said softly. I won't. As they filed out, my father paused at the door. For a second, I thought he might say something real. Instead, he just gave a short, defeated nod and followed them out. After they were gone, Grace adjusted my pillows. That was incredibly brave, she said. It doesn't feel brave, I confessed. It feels like surrender. You're not surrendering, she corrected me gently. You're liberating yourself. There's a world of difference. That afternoon, as I was discharged into the care of people who actually seemed to care, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since before Leo's death. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was the fragile beginning of peace. I had finally honored my own needs and discovered that kindness existed outside the suffocating confines of my family. Watching the city lights from my hotel window that night, I whispered into the darkness, I think you'd be proud of me, Leo. And I could almost hear his voice reply, I was always proud of you. It was yourself you needed to convince. 3 months later, I was a different woman. The physical wounds had healed, leaving only faint scars. The emotional healing was a slower, more deliberate process. The grief support group, full of people who understood loss without needing explanations, became my sanctuary. Eleanor, the group's facilitator, often said, "Grief is a great clarifier. It burns away everything that isn't real." My house, too, underwent a transformation. The restoration company didn't just fix the damage, they improved it, installing a smart home system and reinforcing the plumbing. Destruction had paved the way for renewal. My neighbors became my chosen family. Mrs. Gable brought me soup. The couple next door helped me replant my pottery garden. My family kept their distance, sending occasional impersonal texts. Marcus called once to complain about how the media incident had affected his business. I was polite but detached. The boundary I'd set in the hospital was not a wall, but a filter protecting my healing heart. 6 months after Leo's death, I used his life insurance to establish the Leo Hayes Memorial Grant for International Study at our old university. The grant provided students studying abroad with emergency funds and travel assistance for family members in a crisis, the exact safety net I never had. Creating it gave my grief a purpose. On what would have been our 13th anniversary, I hosted a small gathering at my restored home to announce the first recipient. My true friends were there, the ones who had sat with me in my darkest hours. My family declined the invitation, citing a prior engagement. As I handed the certificate to a talented young architecture student, I felt Leo's love not as a painful absence, but as an enduring presence, shaping the person I was becoming. This grant exists because of a great love, I told the small group in my living room, but also because of a hard lesson. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up. The next week, I received a handwritten letter from my father. I have been thinking about what happened, he wrote. Your mother and brother will never admit it, but I recognize our failure, not just about the airport or the house, but the deeper failure to comfort you. I have no excuses, only a profound and belated regret. The man you married would be proud of the woman you have become. I didn't reply right away. I talked it over with my therapist. What do you want from a relationship with him? She asked. Not what you should want, but what would truly serve you. I eventually wrote back, suggesting occasional one-on-one lunches, no holidays, no family gatherings, just a quiet, honest attempt to build something new. He agreed. Our first lunch was stilted. The third was almost comfortable. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was real. My mother and Marcus remained ghosts in my past. A year to the day after Leo died, I found myself at the airport again, waiting for a flight back to Dubai to visit his grave. Watching families greet each other with hugs and tears, I felt a pang of sadness for what I didn't have. But it was no longer a gaping wound. It was a scar. I had learned that family could be chosen, that support could come from the most unexpected places, and that my worth was never, ever dependent on someone else's ability to see it. As I boarded the plane, I realized how different this journey felt. A year ago, I was returning home broken and abandoned. Now, I carried a community of care within me. The greatest lesson from that terrible homecoming was not about my family's failure. It was about the incredible power of kindness to heal, the family we create when the one we're born into falls short, and the strength we find when we finally decide we are worthy of being saved. If you have ever felt abandoned when you needed support most, please know that you are not alone. Your worth is not determined by others' capacity to recognize it. Sometimes the people we expect to be there for us simply cannot provide what we need due to their own limitations, not our lack of value. The challenge is to remain open to unexpected sources of care and connection, even when previous experience makes that openness feel dangerous. What unexpected sources of support have you discovered during difficult times? Have you ever been surprised by kindness from strangers when those closest to you could not provide what you needed? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be feeling alone in their struggles. Remember that your story matters, your boundaries are valid, and healing is always possible, sometimes in ways we never could have imagined. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. End of story.